if I just sat down here in front of the camera and started talking, it would have been as though nothing had changed since before I left for Brazil. Except for hair, which I can't go back to how I used to look with my hair. I like this, and gonna keep it like that. I can't magically grow my hair out and like that. But let's actually fix a few other things, because quite a few things have changed, and I won't talk about it. There, so it is gone. Nobody cares except for me and my girlfriend. That's fine. Also have a new shirt because that's something that I bought in Brazil, and I had to change because that's what I wore yesterday. The other shirt. All right. So probably it might even have been last year. I was asked to make a video on the differences between Brazil and Norway. Now, back then, I thought, okay, I can't do this video because I don't know anything about Brazil, essentially. I didn't know how the culture was, I didn't know how Brazil looked, to be honest. The only thing that I had really seen of Brazil was, I mean, the few scenes that you see of how it looks when you're watching Fast 5, which is the 5th Fast and Furious movie, one of my favorite movies, but that happens in Rio for the most part. So that's essentially all that I knew about Brazil. Now, things have changed. I've gotten back from Brazil. I stayed there for a month, or 4 weeks, but now I feel like I have much better grasp of what the actual differences are. So I figured, yep, I'm gonna sit down. I am going to actually film this, and we're gonna see how this turns out. So the number one thing that I learned when I got to Brazil was how the infrastructure is different. So number one thing, water here in Norway, it's quite simple. You turn on the sink, and then you decide what temperature you have by regulating the temperature of the sink. You can do that in the kitchen, you can do that in the bathroom, and it's fairly easy. In Brazil, it's even simpler. Turn on the water, that's it. You can't change the temperature. Now, this makes it very easy for baking. It is incredibly impractical for pretty much anything else. I missed being able to change the temperature of the water. It's such a simple thing, but I really missed that. Now I'm back in Norway. Now I have that opportunity again. Second thing about the water is I'm so used to having clean water. Over there, you had to drink from a filter or you had to buy your water. And I mean, that's all fine. Water there is super cheap compared to here, but it's just something that's different. Like here, I'm pretty sure even the water that is used in the toilets is clean enough for you to technically drink it. I wouldn't recommend it, but I believe it's technically clean enough for you to be able to drink it. Right? Second thing when it comes to infrastructure is trash. We recycle pretty much everything that we can recycle. We sort it, and yeah, it's a good system. Over there, everything goes in the same place, and you see a lot of trash just laying around on the streets as well. We have a lot of trash bins, so you don't really have to carry your trash with you for longer distances. Over there in Brazil, that wasn't too uncommon to have to do. Luckily, I lived in an area where I didn't have to do that too often. But it's completely different here. And just looking at how the roads are designed, buses, comfort. A bus ride in Brazil tended to be a lot more shaky than it is here in Norway. That's fine. Get used to it. Another thing is, and I know that that is due to Norway having the luxury of, being Norway. More or less, everyone is pretty well off, but you don't end up seeing a lot of people sleeping on the ground, sleeping on the streets. and when you pass an area that doesn't smell particularly well, eventually you realize why that is. Yeah, just people have to go, and they sleep in the area, then people have to go, right? So another thing is, in Brazil, if you go there as a tourist, as a gringo, I mean, people are going to notice that you're not from there, and people are going to try to sell to you, but with increased prices. Now, it's not nice, but I can definitely see how this is helpful, because, I mean, you try to make money the way you can, right? So it's fine. It happens. It's not nice, but it's necessary. Now in Norway, that isn't the case. Everything has a fixed price. You can't argue on the price. You can't ask for any discounts. But you also don't get people trying to sell things to you at an increased price, right? Another thing is, and this is actually something that I really like, as a person who looks different, I mean, people aren't afraid to go up and talk to you and ask you where you're from, because naturally they're curious. Forgive me, it's still early in the morning. I haven't spoken that much. No, I don't mind this. As I said, it's just something that wouldn't happen in Norway. Now, that being said, language plays a much bigger role in Brazil than it does in Norway. If you, for instance, go to a store and you start, and people realize that you can't speak Norwegian here, it's not a big problem. You just switch over to English, right? In Brazil, that hardly ever happens. I mean, you might find people who try, but I wouldn't have felt comfortable traveling and spending time in Brazil without knowing how to speak Portuguese. I know that there are people who do it, I just wouldn't feel comfortable with it. So I was really glad that I was able to speak Portuguese well enough for this not to be a problem. Now, another thing that you would have realized if you ever traveled to Norway is that things are so much more rigid. Like, people are so strict, there are set patterns, and just stuff like crossing the road. Everyone knows that, okay, cars, they have to stop for you. I mean, you still check if you're ever in doubt, but they will stop for you. But, like, people do it. And buses are on time. If a bus gets there like 3 minutes too late, then that's like a crisis. I mean, it happens fairly often, but still, you're not happy about it. So for me, that was quite a big difference when I came to Brazil, because, I mean, people just go to the bus stop. They don't even use an app to try to see when the bus gets there, because, I mean, generally you shouldn't be using your phone that much outside, because, I mean, why would you want to draw attention to your phone? That's just asking for something to happen. More on that later. But people just stand there, they wait, and they're used to things taking their time. I used to complain to my girlfriend that she was going to be late to work. But, I mean, it happens. She took her time, as far as I could tell. It went completely fine. Doesn't mean that I have to be the same way, but that is the way that things seemed to work in Brazil. Like, things take their time. There's no point in being stressed about it. I have a friend here who's more or less the same way, and it is remarkable the effect that had on me, because I used to live with him, and I'm still trying to learn to be more like that. I'm getting there, I'd say. Now, people in Brazil, they seem to be a lot quicker to reach out, either on Instagram or just in person. If there's anything that they are curious about, if there's anything that they want to learn, they just seem to be that much quicker to reach out. And people here in Norway, whenever you reach out to them, they're usually happy to help, but just most people don't reach out. And I just think that things would be so much better if people weren't so hesitant with just speaking to people, like interacting with others, especially when you need help. It's a lot quicker and easier to just ask someone for help instead of struggling and trying to figure it out on your own. Now, another difference is food. Norway relies a lot on import just because of our cold climate. There are a lot of things that we aren't able to grow here. and I mean, we have the systems for it, but that leads to a wider selection. There were a few things that I like just weren't able to find in Brazil. Foods that I missed and such. It wasn't that big of a problem, but there were a few things that I missed. Now, another thing is I don't think you'll find many people like making traditional Norwegian meals. I think like maybe the most common food that we have here is probably taco, which is a Mexican dish. That's like most people have that once a week at least. And then pizza, more or less the same. That's not Norwegian, although we probably have our own spin on it. But like Norwegian food, I mean, we have our classic Norwegian meals, but I never make them. And it's just compared to Brazil, where you'll have classic Brazilian meals, it is quite different. Now, another thing is, and this is one of my last points, but prices in Brazil makes no sense for a person that is used to living in Norway. So meat is super cheap. At least meat from cows is super cheap. Like buying 500 grams of minced meat, carne moída, it's so incredibly cheap compared to how it is in Norway. And water, as I mentioned earlier, is basically free in stores. Like it costs nothing. I believe we bought 2 liters of water for 7 reais, and here in Norway that would probably been like 40 kroners, which is roughly the equivalent of 16 reais, 16, 17, 18 reais. Now, milk and cheese, that costs, for some reason, approximately the same as it would in Norway. Protein products, I'm someone who goes to the gym like 5 times a week, and I end up like eating a bunch of protein bars, taking protein powder and such. That costs a ton, and I mean, there's no reason to go to Brazil to buy any electronic equipment. Like just because I was curious, I looked at camera gear, I looked at phones, I looked at computers. Everything is just way more expensive in Brazil than it is in Norway, and that makes no sense considering, I mean, it does seem to be closer to the US than Norway is, and it also, people in Brazil, they just make a lot less money because, I mean, we Norwegians are spoiled like that, right? Last thing is safety. I mean, I can walk back from a city close to where I live alone at night using my phone, and I don't have to be worried about anything happening. Nothing's going to happen. In Brazil, I mean, even in broad daylight, I didn't feel like I could use my phone outside. I didn't feel like I could bring my camera. I didn't feel like I could like film as I wanted to, for instance. This watch, I brought it with me. I essentially never wore it when going out. I mean, it is a smartwatch. You're supposed to bring it with you. It's supposed to be used to track what you're doing throughout the day. It just didn't work like that in Brazil. Now, I learned a lot during my time in Salvador, which was where I was visiting, and I learned that I am so incredibly lucky to have this second language that lets me interact with people that think so different from me, and I want others to have the same opportunity. Now, I know that there are a lot of people from all around the world that would like to have the same opportunity, but they can't because language is such a huge barrier for them, and that's where I want to help. Now, will I go back again to Brazil? Of course I will. I have my girlfriend there. I'm going to want to spend as much time as possible with her. Now, do I want to live there? Definitely not at the moment. But, I mean, neither does she. She wants to move. But I am aware that people change their opinions over time. But at least for now, I prefer Norway. It's just that simple. That's it for now. My plans for the rest of the day is trying to make that day as productive as possible, despite me still being jet lagged. And I'll probably start my French studying. As always, best of luck with your studies, and nick out.